Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our 7th day of Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, our second canto, 7th day, and we are in the second chapter, which is focusing particularly on the Supersoul. And we are sort of in the middle of the purport of verse 35, which is really pretty substantial. So let us begin, first of all, by chanting our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, yes, verse 35, and it's got really such a major purport. We couldn't finish the purport yesterday. So anyway, let me just read the verse again, verse 35, Canto 2, Chapter 2. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Yeah, so like I said, we started the purport, but it's really long. And it has mainly it's 3 paragraphs. We did the first paragraph, so we won't go over it again. But just as a point of information for you all, this purport is the most specific purport of Srila Prabhupada's about the Supersoul and the functionings of the Supersoul and how to appreciate the reality of the existence of the Supersoul. So yesterday morning, we went through the first paragraph. It's very substantial. So today we are continuing with the second paragraph. So basically the analysis, it's very analytical. Basically the analysis continues. And Prabhupada says, at this point in our investigation, we may consider the following question. Right, so yeah, let's go through it. On the one hand, we realize that all our perceptions and activities are conditioned by arrangements of material nature, yet we also ordinarily feel and say, I am perceiving or I am doing. Therefore, we can say, I'm actually just reading the purport. I think I'm literally just reading the purport. Therefore, we can say that our material senses of perception and action are moving because we're identifying the self with the material body, and that the superior principle of super self is guiding and supplying us according to our desire. By taking advantage of the guidance of super self in the form of intelligence, we can either continue to study and to put into practice our conclusion that I'm not this body, or we can choose to remain in the false material identification, fancying ourselves to be the possessors and doers. Our freedom consists in orienting our desire either toward the ignorant material misconception or the true spiritual conception. We can easily attain to the true spiritual conception by recognizing the super self, Paramatma, to be our friend and guide, and by dovetailing our intelligence with the superior intelligence of Paramatma. The super self and the individual self are both spirit, and therefore the super self and the individual self are both qualitatively one and distinct from matter. But the super self and the individual self cannot be on an equal level, because the super self gives direction or supplies intelligence, and the individual self follows the direction, and thus actions are performed properly. The individual is completely dependent on the direction of the super self, because in every step, the individual self follows the direction of super self in the matter of seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, willing, etc. And then the third paragraph. And again, devotees and friends, we are basically just going to read through it because it's so profound. So yeah, it continues. So far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities, namely matter, spirit, and super spirit. Now, if we go to the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic intelligence, we can further understand that all three identities, namely matter, individual spirit, and the super spirit, are all dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The super self is a partial representation or plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavad Gita affirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead dominates all over the material world by his partial representation only. God is great, and he cannot be simply an order supplier for the individual selves. Therefore, the super self cannot be a full representation of the Supreme Self, Purushottama, the absolute personality of Godhead. Realization of the super self by the individual self is the beginning of self-realization, and by the progress of such self-realization, one is able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita is the preliminary conception of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the further explanation of the science of Godhead. So, if we stick to our determination and pray for the mercy of the Director of Intelligence sitting within the bodily tree, like a bird sitting with another bird, as explained in the Upanishads, certainly the purport of the revealed information in the Vedas becomes clear to our vision, and there's no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. The intelligent man, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, surrenders himself as at the lotus feet of Vasudeva, as confirmed by the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 19. Yeah, so anyway, you may have to listen to that a few times to really get it. And the first paragraph is really essential to the whole picture. But you'll find if you really focus on it nicely, it becomes really clear that the super soul is there and the super soul is working with us. Verse 36, O King, it is therefore essential that every human being hear about, glorify, and remember the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, always and everywhere. So there's one purport here. Prabhupada begins it by saying, Srila Shukadev Goswami begins this verse with the word tasmat, or therefore. It's in the Sanskrit first word. Because in the previous verse, he's already explained that there is no auspicious means for salvation other than the sublime process of bhakti yoga. Yeah, so therefore, because there's no auspicious means for salvation other than bhakti yoga, therefore, it's essential that we hear about, glorify, and remember the Lord, always and everywhere. So, okay, Prabhupada then gets into it. There are 9 processes of devotional service, and, well, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma, Navedanam, hearing, chanting, remembering, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, serving lotus feet, Archanam, worshipping formally, Vandanam, offering prayers, Dasyam, becoming a servant of the Lord, Dasyam, Sakyam, becoming a friend. What is it again? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma, Navedanam, and then surrendering everything. Yeah, so there's 9, but Prabhupada says hearing is most important. The first one, namely hearing, is the most important function in the process of bhakti yoga. Right. And Prabhupada then continues that point that without hearing you can't make progress. So we must hear from the Vedic literatures about the supersoul. Yes. Okay. Since it has been ascertained that the Lord is the supersoul of everything, he should therefore be heard and glorified, I would say heard about, and glorified everywhere in all ways. That is the special duty of the human being. So then Prabhupada makes the point, and what an important point it is. When we stop that hearing about the Lord, we become victims to hearing man-made rubbish. And you might say, oh, that's very strong language, but it's true. It's all rubbish, actually. Right, so machines are okay, but they must be used in the service of the Lord. If they can help us, like we're broadcasting this, it's all mechanical. We're broadcasting this, we're using cameras, we're using sound equipment, we're using the internet, and all these things, and you down the other end, the receivers, you're also using your devices and so on. They're machines. So they're okay. But if they're not used for glorifying the Lord or hearing the glorification, then degradation sets in. So therefore we must hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way humanity can be saved. It's really powerful term, isn't it? Humanity can be saved. Yeah. In other words, if we don't use these things, machines, for hearing and chanting about Krishna, or if hearing and chanting of the Lord doesn't go on, then there's going to be very bad result. Very bad result. And then Prabhupada goes on, hearing is solidified by chanting. One who has perfectly heard from the perfect source becomes convinced and thus becomes convinced about the Lord, and thus becomes enthusiastic to glorify the Lord. Yes. And Prabhupada mentions all the great acharyas, Ramanuja, Madhva, Chaitanya, Saraswati Thakur, even in other countries, Muhammad or Christ and others, they've all extensively glorified the Lord by chanting always and in every place. So, Sanatan Dharma, that's in Sanskrit, you can say, a name for our process, or Bhagavad Dharma, means eternal glorification of the Lord, always and everywhere. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Lord is the master of all time and all space, and therefore the Lord's holy name must be heard, glorified, and remembered everywhere in the world, that will bring about the desired peace and prosperity so eagerly awaited by the people of the world. The word cha includes all the remaining processes of methods of Bhakti Yoga, as mentioned before. You get the idea. In the verse, hearing and chanting have been specifically referred to, mentioned directly. But then the word cha is there, which means and. So it means hearing and chanting and all the other 7 processes, so you do 9. All right, and verse 37, those who drink through oral reception, fully filled with the nectarian message of Lord Krishna, the beloved of the devotees, purify the polluted aim of life known as material enjoyment, and thus go back to Godhead, to the lotus feet of Him, the personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the sufferings of human society are due to a polluted aim of life, namely lording it over the material resources. Because Prabhupada has made that point already. We're just in the very early stages of the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada's made this point so many times already, repeatedly, because, we've got to hear it, and then hear it again, then hear it again. Otherwise, our old habits die hard. So our tendencies towards material nature will rise again. Right, so, and Prabhupada, makes some really interesting points. The more humanity exploits material resources for sense gratification, the more it will be entrapped by material energy. Yeah. That's such an important point, that you can't flirt with material nature. You can't flirt with sense gratification. If you try to, it will catch you. And, it may be gradually, it may be quickly, but one way or the other, if you don't break out of it as quickly as possible, you'll be dragged into a materialistic position. Yeah, gradually. I mean, if you really get dragged, you'll be dragged back into material life completely. Yes. So, Srila Prabhupada mentions a whole lot of human necessities which are supplied by the Lord sufficiently. Let's see what Prabhupada considers to be necessities. Food grains, yes. Milk, fruit, wood, stone, sugar, silk, jewels, cotton, salt, water, vegetables, etc. So, yeah, the Lord, at least in a Krishna conscious situation, the Lord supplies these things. And even things, sugar has a bad name amongst, some segment of particularly Western population, right? Definitely. But Prabhupada took sugar. Yeah. And some devotee said, made some comment about sugar. And Prabhupada was not appreciative. Like you shouldn't eat it or something. And Prabhupada just didn't accept that. So there's no need for machinery to get these things or get things by machinery. Krishna helps us. Artificial needs never help. Artificial needs never help. We need simple living and high thinking. So Shukadev suggests here that the highest, Prabhupada's using that word, the highest perfection for humanity, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam sufficiently, it's the torchlight for those who have lost vision. So Prabhupada says, Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada has commented on the Kata Amrita mentioned in this verse. Kata Amrita means nectarian, even eternal kata, that which is spoken. He's commented on the Kata Amrita mentioned in this verse and has indicated Srimad Bhagavatam to be the nectarian message of the personality of Godhead. By sufficient hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, the polluted aim of life, lording it over material nature, will subside. Then, Prabhupada says, people can live peacefully. When I was young, John Lennon, extremely famous, John Lennon, post-Beatles, after the Beatles, he wrote a song, Imagine. It's really very, very famous. And it's just such rubbish. It's just such rubbish. And even a few materialists have pointed that out. Yeah, it's just totally materialistic. Totally. Even though it sounds kind of dreamy, romantic, it's kind of got a beautiful tune to it, that sort of thing. But it's just beautifully presented rubbish. Yeah. Above us is only sky. There's no God. There's no kingdom of God. Anyway, he got shot, He got shot. George Harrison was addicted to cigarettes. He died of cancer at the age of, I think, 56. Yeah, if you get into nonsense, sooner or later you pay the price. Okay, right, so now the second paragraph. So the point is, for the pure devotee, any topic of the Lord is pleasing. Yeah. Unlike what some people think that, sort of like, pseudo-devotees in some cases, but in other cases just, devotees who don't understand things clearly enough. They think you must focus on Vrindavan Leela and even Radha Krishna Leela. That's what we want, that's what we must do, that's what everyone must do. But Srila Prabhupada, this is one place here, but there are a few other places just coming up in the second canto, because I saw while doing notes for the rest of the second canto, not regularly like a lot of these points, but from time to time Prabhupada brings up this point, that real devotees, they'll appreciate anything to do with Krishna. The process of creation from the Lord, great, wonderful. And it's not just, process of creation, that's for neophytes, don't worry about it. Let's focus on the rasa dance. Right, so Prabhupada says these topics are all pleasing in relation with his name, fame, quality, entourage, etc. They're all pleasing. And because these topics have been approved by great devotees like Narada, Hanuman, Nanda Maharaj, and other inhabitants of Vrindavan, certainly such messages are transcendental and pleasing to the heart and soul. And Prabhupada, this is the end of the chapter, actually. So Prabhupada's really, focusing on this point and driving it home at this, very strategic point in the chapter. If we constantly hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev assures that we will reach the Lord and render service to him in Goloka Vrindavan. And the last paragraph, so thus by Bhakti Yoga, directly applied, not watered down, but really, straight to the point, sufficiently hearing the message of the Lord, then material contamination is eliminated without having to contemplate the universal form. And Prabhupada concludes the purport and the chapter by saying, and by practicing Bhakti Yoga, if the performer is not purified from the material contamination, he must be a pseudo-devotee. For such an impostor, there is no remedy for being freed from material entanglement. So, okay, devotees, that is the end of the second chapter of the second canto. Let us, without further delay, let us just move on to the third chapter. Let's do it. Why not? Oops, where's... Oh, here it is. Okay, there it is. Right. Oops. So here we are, devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Pure Devotional Service, the Change in Heart. And we can see very clearly how Shukadev Goswami has been developing the subject matter. First of all, it's the universal, first chapter, the universal form, particularly for impersonalists, people who are just too much absorbed on the material level, who are not able, ultimately who are not able to accept the Lord as the Supreme Person and his pastimes and relationships as being, like the highest transcendental manifestations. Then, so to appreciate the supersoul, to appreciate the universal form will help one come to this point of devotional service. But in the interim, a third stage is mentioned, and that is appreciating the supersoul. Yeah. But all of that, both either together or just from the universal form, they're all to bring us to the point of pure devotional service, the change in heart, and pure devotional service to two-armed Krishna, or at least one of his Vaikuntha expansions. But Krishna the person, not like this sort of, would you say, vague or, quite extraordinary at the very least, manifestation of the universal form, and the supersoul who is just a partial form, and the supersoul who one cannot have a relationship with, like an ongoing personal relationship, because he's a functional form of the Lord for overseeing and managing the conditioned souls. So, okay, devotees, here there are 3 sections. Actually, it's a much shorter chapter. It's only 25 verses. And there are 3 sections. First section, from verse 1 to verse 12, different goals for different worshippers. Then Shaunaka inquires further about Maharaj Parikshit. That's verses, 13 to 16. Then, devotees, let's have a look here. Then, the third section, from verse 17 to verse 25, Shaunaka emphasizes devotional activities. Right. Okay, so let's see, where are we here? Okay. We're a bit, where are we with verse? Oh, okay. Anyway, all right, sorry. Now I was looking at the schedule. All right, so here we go. First of all, the first section, different goals for different worshippers. Verse 1 to 12. Let's read the translations so we get an idea of the flow of the story, the narration, what's going on here. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, as you have inquired from me as to the duty of the intelligent, as you have inquired from me as to the duty of the intelligent man who's on the threshold of death, so I have answered you. Then, devotees, we have interesting situation. Verse 2 to verse 7, 6 verses have been put together. And so this is the translation. One who desires to be absorbed in the impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence should worship the master of the Vedas, Lord Brahma or Brihaspati, the learned priest. And it's all about, if you want this, worship this person. If you want that, worship another person. One who desires powerful sex should worship the heavenly king Indra. And one who desires good progeny should worship the great progenitors called the Prajapatis. One who desires good fortune should worship Durga Devi, the superintendent of the material world. One desiring to be very powerful should worship fire. And one who aspires only after money should worship the Vasus. One should worship the Rudra incarnations of Lord Shiva if he wants to be a great hero. One who wants a large stock of grains should worship Aditi. One who desires to attain the heavenly planets should worship the sons of Aditi. One who desires a worldly kingdom should worship Vishvadev. And one who wants to be popular with the general mass of population should worship the Sadhya demigod. One who desires a long span of life should worship the demigods known as the Ashvini Kumars. And a person desiring a strongly built body should worship the earth. One who desires stability in his post should worship the horizon and the earth combined. One who desires to be beautiful should worship the beautiful residents of the Gandharva planet. And one who desires a good wife should worship the Apsaras and the Urvashi society girls of the heavenly kingdom. One who desires domination over others should worship Lord Brahma, the head of the universe. One who desires tangible fame should worship the personality of Godhead. And one who desires a good bank balance should worship the demigod Varuna. If one desires to be a greatly learned man, he should worship Lord Shiva. And if one desires a good marital relation, he should worship the chaste goddess Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva. Wow. Okay. So now you know what to do. Anyway, that's just a joke. No, you don't. Don't do that. Yeah. Yes, okay. So anyway, we're reading the verses, so on to verse 8. One should worship Lord Vishnu or his devotee for spiritual advancement in knowledge and for protection of heredity and advancement of a dynasty. One should worship the various demigods. 9. One who desires domination over a kingdom or an empire should worship the Manus. One who desires victory over an enemy should worship the demons. And one who desires sense gratification should worship the moon. But one who desires nothing of material enjoyment should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, verse 10. And this is a very famous verse and very important verse. Canto 2, chapter 3, verse 10. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the supreme whole, the personality of Godhead. Verse 11. All the different kinds of worshippers of multi-demigods can attain the highest perfectional benediction, which is spontaneous attraction, unflinchingly fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they can attain that only by the association of the pure devotee of the Lord. All righty. So on to 12. And the section concludes here. So verse 12. Transcendental knowledge in relation with the Supreme Lord Hari is knowledge resulting in the complete suspension of the waves and whirlpools of the material modes. Such knowledge is self-satisfying due to its being free from material attachment and being transcendental. It is approved by authorities. Who could fail to be attracted? Well, I tell you what, really a whole lot of people could fail to be attracted. Are failing. Of course, we can also say that it's our failure as devotees for not presenting, all these things widely enough in human society, or maybe intelligently enough. Okay, anyway, let's go through the whole section. So verse 1, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, as you've inquired from me as to the duty of the intelligent man who's on the threshold of death, so I have answered you. Right. So yes, there's a purport here. Most people, Prabhupada says, most people are less intelligent because they have little knowledge of the soul. Most identify with the body, which they are not. So they're in different statuses of life, but without that knowledge there, human lives are total failures. So therefore, out of so many of them, one may inquire about his soul by reading Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. But unless those people are in touch with the spiritual master, they can't realize the soul. So then, Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 3, out of thousands. It's already been said, out of many of them one may inquire about the soul. But then Prabhupada says, out of thousands more, some may come to know Lord Krishna in truth. Many, many may not. So then, Srila Prabhupada refers to, Vedanta Sutra, different Vedic literatures. Just have a look here. Yes. So anyway, Chaitanya Charitamrita says that Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, prepared the Vedic literatures as Vyasadeva for reading by intelligent people. But now, the intelligent class of people in human society, but unfortunately, the great majority of human society are almost totally forgetful of Krishna. So anyway, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is there to revive that lost relationship, which is possible in the human form only, really. Yeah. So we shouldn't waste the human form. Yeah. By, instead of thinking about how to reawaken our forgotten relationships with the Lord, we should give great attention to doing that. Otherwise, the importance of the human form of life, Prabhupada says, is often not understood even by relatively intelligent people. So in the word manishanam, or thoughtful, was used. Mana meaning the mind. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a manishanam person like Maharaj Parikshit must therefore take to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna and fully engage himself in devotional service, hearing, chanting, etc. of the holy name and pastimes of the Lord, which are all Hari Katamrita. This action is especially recommended when one is preparing for death. So, some older person like myself, you can say, well, it's very relevant for me, or this type of person. But at the same time, even if you're only 1 day old, who knows? If you're 1 year, every day how many children die? It's really a lot. And what to speak of people who are, 34? Yeah, 34. You're sort of around halfway, approximately. How old? Yeah, okay, anyway. How old was your grandmother when she passed away?
Early 80s.
Early. My mother was 91. My grandmother was 80. My great-grandmother, maternal, was 99. Anyway. 38, though, you're in the vicinity, 34 of halfway point. Yeah. All right. So now we come to that massive verse 2 to verse 7. I don't know if I really need to go through it again. Well, let's go through it. One who desires to be absorbed in the impersonal Brahma-Jyoti effulgence should worship the master of the Vedas. It's either Lord Brahma or Brihaspati, the learned priest of the demigods. One who desires powerful sex should worship the heavenly king Indra. And one who desires good progeny should worship the great progenitors called the Prajapatis. One who desires good fortune should worship Durga Devi, the superintendent of the material world. One desiring to be very powerful should worship fire. And one who aspires only after money should worship the Vasus. One should worship the Rudra incarnations of Lord Shiva if he wants to be a great hero. One who wants a large stock of grains should worship Aditi. One who desires to attain the heavenly planets should worship the sons of Aditi. One who desires a worldly kingdom should worship Vishvadev. And one who wants to be popular with the general mass of population should worship the Sadhya demigod. One who desires a long span of life should worship the demigods known as the Ashvini Kumars. They are the physicians amongst the demigods, the doctors of the demigods. And a person desiring a strongly built body should worship the earth. One who desires stability in his post should worship the horizon and the earth combined. One who desires to be beautiful should worship the beautiful residents of the Gandharva planet. And one who desires a good wife should worship the Apsaras and the Urvashi society girls of the heavenly kingdom. One who desires domination over others should worship Lord Brahma, the head of the universe. One who desires tangible fame should worship the personality of Godhead. And one who worships a good bank balance should worship the demigod Varuna. If one desires to be a greatly learned man, he should worship Lord Shiva. And if one desires a good marital relation, he should worship the chaste goddess Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva. There you go, devotees. That's a whole lot, isn't it? Anyway, let's go through the purport here. It's not such a big purport, actually. I mean, it is a moderate-sized purport, actually. So anyway, Prabhupada begins by saying there are different forms of worship, modes of worship for different people with different desires. That's, of course, referred to in Bhagavad Gita. So you can't, there's just too many things. You can't expect to be expert at everything. So therefore you should choose. If you're on that level of demigod worship and trying to improve your situation in material life, you should choose a particular demigod who's overseeing whatever particular material thing or achievement like that you are most interested in. And then you should do that. And the example is Ravana. And Prabhupada, what does Prabhupada say? That Ravana was made a very powerful man by worshipping Lord Shiva. And he used to offer severed heads to please Lord Shiva. He became so powerful by the grace of Lord Shiva that all the demigods were afraid of him until he at last challenged the personality of Godhead, Sri Ramachandra, and thus ruined himself. So people who do that are less intelligent, and that's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 20. Yeah. So the real problem is not how to become very powerful or rich or have a good husband or wife or these types of achievements. The real problems are birth, death, old age, and disease. Yeah. No one wants these things generally, but they create problems which cannot be solved by any demigod or science. So Maharaj Parikshit is addressed by Shukadev Goswami as Manishi, a man of highly developed mind, because he left everything and surrendered to the Lord by hearing. Aspirations for material enjoyment are condemned. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, such aspirations are something like the intoxication of the degraded human society. Intelligent persons should try to avoid these aspirations and seek instead the permanent life by returning home back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We'll carry on tomorrow.